Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to have this lovely woman here with us today. This is Susan Steels, and she is going to talk to us about what happened with her mother at a nursing home in New Brunswick, because it's a really important case that I think people need to be aware of. And it's one that really highlights an issue that isn't discussed enough in the broader public, but it is something that is happening to people, and it's very dangerous and it's very upsetting. So, and why I invited Susan on today is because her story was in the news again. Her story made national headlines, but it was in the news again yesterday because individuals involved with her mother's care are now coming up for a disciplinary hearing, which you don't often hear happening at this level tied to an eviction notice. So I'm going to introduce Susan, and I'm going to have her kind of just start off by telling us what happened. And this was mid-pandemic. This is 2021, terrible time for the long-term care community. Seniors dying by the day, preventable negligence, widespread errors. This was a very stressful and tenuous time for families. So I think it's really important to preface that first, and then let Susan tell us what happened in the case of your mother.
Thank you. Thank you. So, my mother was living in a long-term care home in New Brunswick. It was a lovely home, a gold star home. We were really pleased when we were able to, when she was able to get a bed in the home, and we thought that would be her forever home. And we were, had lovely relationships with the staff, and we were happy. And so then during the pandemic, and for good reasons, the nursing home severely restricted in the early days the visitation. And so for about 8 months, we were not able to go into the home to see our mom. There were a couple of outside visits where she was covered in a blanket, but we didn't really, we weren't at her bedside providing care for her. And up until that point, we visited her every single day. So my niece would go on her lunch hour from work, and we never abandoned our mother, even though she lived in long-term care. We were good caregivers because my sisters both were nurses, and even though I was in Ontario, I would call my mom and visit her when I went home. So what happened was when they announced that they were going to be opening up to, they called them essential care partners. My sister, Patty, who was my mom's power of attorney, she had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So I was in Ontario and I retired. I had just retired after 30 years working in acute care as a social worker and a geriatric educator. And so
So you know a little bit about this, just a little bit.
Yeah. I did all the outreach expansion education in the northern Toronto with the Regional Geriatric Program of Toronto. So I did the actual education for those geriatric outreach teams. So I knew my stuff, but I was there for my mother. And so my sister couldn't keep up with the ECP schedule because the way the nursing home implemented it was you were allowed 3 visits 3 times a week, but you had to be consistent with those visits. And if you didn't show up, you could jeopardize having all your visits canceled. And because Patty was on chemotherapy, she couldn't keep that consistency with the visits. So I said, I'll come home and I'll be mom's ECP. So I came home, and my brother and I were the mom's 2 ECPs, and we never missed a visit because we didn't want to jeopardize losing the privilege, which it was a privilege. So my very first visit to my mom was November 1st, 2020. I went in and we
2021, right?
No, November.
It's January 20.
No.
Was it 20? Okay.
Yeah, well, they never, even though the government.
Oh yeah, no, it's November. Yeah.
Even though the government had allowed them to open the doors and they had established their public health, had established their guidelines, that specific nursing home decided when and how they were going to use those guidelines. So we got our very first visit November 2020. we went in, and my mother, before we went in, my mother was walking with a walker. She was feeding herself. She was
Yeah.
very frail and demented, but when I went in, she was in a wheelchair. She was restrained. She was withdrawn. She didn't know who I was. And it was just like, what the heck is it? And she looked really, really skinny, like really skinny. And so I went home and I said to my sister, I said, there's something wrong with mom. Like there's something seriously wrong with mom. And so then we called the nursing home and we said, we need to get a meeting. We need we need to meet. And so we had a meeting with the nurse on duty, like the head nurse. And we learned through that one meeting, my mom's SSRIs had been tripled. She had lost 25% of her body weight.
We heard this so much. I'm sure you read our research. This is
Yeah.
exactly what we heard from families across Canada.
Yeah. And it was like a classic, like something's wrong with mom. So, yeah. So,
and for everyone at home, SSRIs are antidepressants.
right.
So just in case. So,
Yeah.
and this was part of the chemical restraint we talk a lot about in this field, right?
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of those medications skyrocket during the pandemic.
Yeah. And my mother's call bell was broken. Her television had been cut off and put in another resident's name. And nobody even told us. Nobody know. It was just like, what the heck? Yeah, what the heck? So we went into like full mode, like, how do we protect mom? How do we make sure that mom is going to survive this pandemic? So we met with the nurse. We came up with a plan of care. We met with the doctor. We discovered, they told us my mother had a cardiac episode and they gave her troponin. They didn't tell us. They didn't tell us. And my sisters are nurses. So we were like, you can't do those things. We want to be informed.
That would violate the legislation in Ontario for sure.
Yeah. So then we met with the doctor. And the doctor thought she might have she had a suspected malignancy. She said, I suspect she has a malignancy, possibly bowel cancer. But my sister who has a power of attorney said, well, we don't want a colonoscopy. Like, she's old and she's frail and there's a pandemic. We don't want her going to the hospital for a colonoscopy, but we do want the FOBT, the fetal occult blood test, which is like a non-invasive test to see if there's blood in her stool, which would kind of give you an idea that she did have this bowel cancer. So that was in November. We met with the CEO in December. And so we, again, reinforced the CEO. We want communication. We need to be communicated with. And at the end of the meeting, the CEO, she asked my sister for a hug. My sister was in chemotherapy. The CEO told us that she was just recovering from shingles. And she asked my sister if she could hug her. And my sister was like, okay, and there you go. My sister's a merchant, she's not a huggy person. So she was like, okay.
Well, in the middle of a pandemic, when she's already immunocompromised, and in a setting that is very vulnerable and plagued by outbreaks, this might cause some anxiety among most people, myself included.
Yeah, but we really felt that we had to be kind and really walk on eggshells to make sure we managed while we were locked out.
So I heard this all the time.
It was really so then that was in December, and she locked all the ECPs out again because there was an outbreak in a different part of the province. So in a different nursing home, and at the same, like, New Brunswick had turned orange. It was just orange. So, and she locked all the ECPs out.
But do you still, we still allowed the, essential caregivers in, but they had to mask, obviously do testing. That wasn't even an option for you?
It was not an option. She locked us out.
That's not okay.
And even though the guideline for public health said that she could let families in under, she never ever let families in. She treated the 20% occupancy for ECP for visitors. Yeah. She applied that 20% to the ECPs. So she would only let 20% occupancy of ECPs in. And so she was like, she just came up with her own version of how she was going to adopt essential caregivers. So then so then we were locked out again. And then while we were locked out, we had a meeting because my mother had an episode where she fainted. And then they called us and said, your mom had this episode and we think she's dying. And we want they were counseling us towards palliative care. And my sister said, well, listen, my mother's on, it's like my sister thought she had a vagal episode. Like from her clinical knowledge, she thought she had a vagal episode. And she said, I'm not going to consent to palliative care unless I can get in and see, as my mother's power of attorney, and lay my eyes on her myself. And they said, no, you can't come in because no ECPs are allowed in. And we will let you in with your consent. We'll let you in. And hopefully you'll get in before she loses consciousness.
Oh my gosh.
So we said no. And then later on that night, later in the day, they called us back again and said she recovered and she was no longer dying. So
what?
We were like,
what month was this?
This was in January 16th.
Okay.
That was January 2021. While we were locked out. So my mother also had a pressure ulcer on her heel. So she had, and she wasn't walking anymore. It's just awful.
Yeah.
So then they opened it up. This was like, I was saying, in March, but then they said, you can only come in. We're only going to let one ECP one time a week come in. So then we came in. It was just like, it was torture. And every time I went in, my mom was worse and worse and worse. And then she opened it up again, and I came home and I said to my sister, I said, something's really wrong. There's something seriously wrong. And so I said, we need to plan a care meeting. And my sister says, okay. So she sat down and she wrote an email to the nurse in charge of the unit. Yeah. And she went, my mother looks like she has a contracture. My mother's spitting out all of her medication. Can we look at a medication review to deprescribe, making sure that pain is like you prioritize the drugs that she really does need. She still has hip protectors and she's lost 25% of her body weight, and she's not a falls risk anymore, and she's restrained. She's like, so we need to really sit down and reestablish the plan of care. So they didn't that was on a Tuesday. They didn't respond. We didn't get a respond back. Then on Thursday, when we came in, my sister came with me because they did say because of her cancer, they would let her come in when she was able. So my sister came with us, and we're like, there's something, we need a response to our email. And then the next day, she got a response from not from the nurse, but from the CEO, and saying that your mother's not dying, your mother doesn't have a contracture. And it was very like a harsh email. And then she ended it with, since you don't like our visitation rules, you can take your mother home. And if you don't take your mother home, I'll work with Department of Social Development to move her to another nursing home.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. She said.
So immediately, this is the irony, is that families are terrified and they always feel like they're walking on eggshells because your loved one is captive in these places. And then this is the worst case scenario the families are fearful of, that if you raise, alarms, and if you tell people that something, you don't feel comfortable or something's off, this is the response families fear.
It's
right there.
Yeah.
And I can't even believe you received that at that time in particular, when it's already hard enough for families. It was
awful. It was awful. And my sister, who was dying, and she's like, well, I can't. I'm like, how do you tell a dying person, like, to take their dying mother home?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Your dying mother, who is like who's now a Hoyer left, who's got pressure ulcers, who's like total care, demented. It's like, and just go take her home because you don't. And my sister was like, so Patty
Oh my
responded right away, and
Yeah.
she said, I don't understand what you mean. Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean by that statement? She didn't get a response back from the CEO until it was Tuesday, 2 business days later, which would have been like on the Tuesday morning. She got a letter by registered mail. Due to the lack of trust in our care and organization, your mother is evicted. She didn't use the word
Oh
evicted.
my
Your
gosh.
mother's being discharged from our home, and in 15 days, and
Oh,
in 15 days,
oh my gosh.
and you can direct all further communication to our lawyer.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry for yelling. I cannot even believe
Mm-hmm.
that is the way you would address a family at an already horrifically stressful
Awful.
time. And who would take her? First of all, and as you probably know, in Ontario, there's upwards of 40,000 people on the wait list for a bed. People are waiting years. What, 2 weeks? Where is she going to go in 2 weeks? I'm sure there's wait lists in New Brunswick as well. It's not
Then they're all waiting in the hospital. Half of them are waiting in acute care. And so when that happened, we thought, well, maybe she just had a really bad day. You know?
Understatement. I mean,
so you think, she must have had, and maybe there's a misunderstanding. Like, we're healthcare providers, and so we thought, well, maybe she had a bad day. Maybe there was a we wanted to give the benefit that she didn't really, she could correct her behavior.
That's very graceful of you.
But we didn't know how to do that because we could only communicate through her lawyer.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
So then we thought, well, we better get a lawyer because, I mean, we don't have lawyers on retainers. We're ordinary people. And so we're like, we better get a lawyer. So we started calling around in the small town.
Oh my
God. And conflict of interest. They have their public trustees. They're, and they're involved in the industry. So we finally found a lawyer that was willing to communicate with that other lawyer. But in the meantime, we did start calling our member of parliament, our MLAs, the New Brunswick, Cecile Casquisa, who's the New Brunswick seniors advocate. I didn't even know, seniors' rights. She's not the seniors advocate. She's the seniors' rights. So we didn't even know somebody like that existed. But so you're Googling, you've got 15 days to find your mother a new home.
Oh my God.
And the letter said she was going to send her somewhere to a vacant bed in New Brunswick. And we're like,
anywhere, presumably
anywhere. And then we start Googling, and then we find out that she did it before. And she sent this poor old man to Campobello Island, which you need to get a passport to get in because
Come on.
Yeah. And so we thought, well, was she going to put her in a helicopter and bring her to Campobello Island? Because that's probably the only place that has an available bed. Like, we were desperate, and no one would talk to us. Like, and we weren't allowed to talk in the nursing home. We only could go through the lawyer. So it was crazy. And so we and when we called the government, like the people that are supposed to protect us, they said they're a private business and we don't manage them. Their board does, and they can do, and there's this piece in the legislation called 17.1 that says they can evict for any reason, and there's no right to appeal. Like there's nothing you can do about it. It was like, sucks to be
New
you.
Brunswick, that is out of control. I cannot even, and this is just more credence to why I believe that, there should never be private anything. Like, I understand there's different gradations of ownership, right? And my students will learn this. There's the public, municipal, regional homes, which, I always think are ideal, best outcomes. But there aren't any in New Brunswick. I believe you were telling me.
No, there's no municipally funded. They're all.
So you only have the option of private, not-for-profit or private for-profit.
Right.
And, people think just because it's not profit, it's perfect. It's similar to the municipal homes, but that does not bear out in the evidence, right?
No.
So we find that they're middle of the road when you look at, especially with the death rates during COVID. And that ties to the care provided and the staffing levels. We all know this.
Yeah.
So But that's
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Private industry makes their own rules,
They
apparently.
make
This is the
they
problem.
and what we learned is that the government permitted them to make their own rules. So
Yeah.
the government, it was like, sucks to be you, you're on your own. Really? And they said, well, they can do it. They can do it for any reason, and
Oh my God.
they're private businesses. And so we said, okay. So then we went we went to the seniors advocate. We went everywhere. Then they did give us an extension of 7 days on that 15 days.
So 3
Uh,
weeks. You've got 3 weeks.
you're right. And there's no beds available except for these remote areas, like these islands in remote areas. But then we thought, but we thought once we kept asking, like the seniors advocate said that he would try to get a meeting to sit down and work out a plan that was in the best interest of our mom, because that's what we wanted. And they came back and said, no, we can do this for any reason. Contracts up, collect your goods. And there was no compassion at all for the fact that my mom we felt that she was dying. She looked like she was dying. They said she wasn't dying. And so what do you do? So in those 3 weeks, I continued to go and visit my mother. I was like, there's no way
Of course.
I'm still showing up. I was I couldn't say anything because I was afraid if I said anything, I get kicked out.
Mhm.
And if I got kicked out, then my mom would have nobody. So my brother and I both continued, and we just played business as usual. And unless and everybody, the staff, they all played business as usual. It was like you were completely gaslit. And so I was like, okay, well, and then I thought, well, maybe they aren't going to evict mom because all her pictures are still on the walls and her laundry's still going down. So
Okay. Yeah.
maybe they are going to sit down with us and work out a solution. So you didn't really know. And then then the eviction day came,
Mhm.
and the phone rang at 10:25 in the morning. And I was at my two sisters and we stayed overnight with my sister that was dying. And the phone rang, and my sister who was dying answered the phone, and he said, hi, this is the doctor from the hospital, from the emergency
Oh
from
my
the
gosh. They
hospital.
sent her there.
No, oh, no. And he said, you're I expected your mother here by now, and she's not here. And we said,
What?
what are you talking
What?
about? Like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, didn't you, like, yeah, no, this was arranged last night. The a direct transfer into a medical bed.
And you weren't told.
No, no,
Oh my
we didn't.
gosh.
We weren't. And
Oh my gosh.
so all of the whole discharge package was prepared. The ambulance was booked. The the doctor had made arrangements for a direct admission, and and then the night before, the next morning at 10:25, the doctor calls and from the hospital and says, I expected your mother here by now. At the same time the phone rang, the landline rang, and it was the nursing home. And my brother-in-law answered the phone and said, oh, she's on the other line. Patty's on the other line. She'll call you right back. She called right back,
Oh my
and
gosh.
they said, your mother's in the ambulance on her way to the hospital because you couldn't get her another nursing home bed. And the ambulance report said
Oh
that
my
she
gosh.
left at 10:25. Hospital 10:25,
Oh
nursing home
my,
10:25,
that is
ambulance
scary.
report 10:25, and
That
it
is scary.
all was organized the night before.
Oh my gosh.
So we were like, and the doctor was lovely. Like he was he was, he said, you know what, if it was my mother, let's just get her in here and we'll work it
Bless
out.
his
We'll work
soul.
something out. And we said, okay. We said, there's something going on. So then that was, he said, we'll run a few tests, but it looks like a progression of dementia, and we'll run a few tests. And we said, okay, like, let's just do what's best for mom. Um, so then I don't want to lose my train of thought because it is important to let you know that we did use our own abilities and we found my mother a nurse. We got my mother on a shortlisted nursing home
Yeah.
bed. We got her accepted on the short list. We only had like whatever,
Wow.
21 days.
No time.
We in the middle of a pandemic, when you couldn't get in to visit, when
Worst
there was
time.
48 hours where they had to keep beds vacant, but we managed to be able to get mom accepted on a nursing home. And we were told she was like second on the list. And we communicated that to the CEO
So
through,
just like hold off because
right,
we have
through,
something lined up.
yeah,
Okay.
because at that point we were like, you know
But
what,
they didn't want to wait.
we don't want her there either.
Yeah.
And the lawyer at her end, like, so they all knew, but they were just, it was like they were having fun playing with us, like it was torture. And so, it was awful. And so anyhow, so my mother was admitted to the hospital on the first, and it was a long weekend. So they discharged her on the Saturday of a long weekend in May. The first business day back, which was a Tuesday, my sister got a call from the discharge planner saying that because we failed to get my mother another nursing home bed, that they're going to be charging her the maximum per
What?
diem rate. In New Brunswick at that time, it was $160 a day. My mother's
What?
a pensioner, right? You know, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And
It's like insult to injury, insult,
yeah,
injury, 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 injury.
it's
Oh my
awful.
gosh.
It's awful. It was like bully. We were just felt like there was a whole system that was supposed to protect you. We're all banding together to
Oh my God.
bully you. And so my sister said, my sister works in the hospital. She knows the nurses. And she's like, I don't get it. She goes, yeah, no, it came from way up. It came from administration. You call this family and you tell them they didn't cooperate. And we were like, but we did cooperate.
Oh my
But
gosh.
the nursing home and the doctor's diagnosis was failure to provide social. Failure to provide social, failure to thrive social. Sorry, that was my mom's admitting diagnosis.
Oh my
Failure to,
gosh.
so like I said, the doctor said, we'll just run a few tests and we'll figure out, what's going on, and we'll get things sorted out. So they did a CT scan and a chest X-ray and came back that same day. We got that threat of the maximum per diem day. They came back and they said, your mother has terminal cancer. She is all through her lungs and her liver.
Oh my gosh.
She's dying. And we recommend that,
Oh my God.
she go to palliative care. And my sister said, oh, of course, that was, it wasn't surprising to us that she was dying. But it was awful because to have her dying and to be treated like she wasn't dying, and for us to be saying she's dying, for them to be treating us like we were just trying to pull the wool over their eyes to gain access to kind of, bypass their visitor it was awful. So then my mom was sent to a hospice, residential hospice, and she died 7 days after there. So she died 15 days from the time they put her in an ambulance. And
how is your sister doing at this point?
So at this point, my sister, she was still like, she's just a feisty girl. Like, she's so spirited and just a really lovely person, really. And she was dealing with the task at hand. She promised my mother she would be her POA. She put my mother first. She was just dealing with the task at hand, while at the same time being worked up for to be qualified for a clinical trial, which she never was able to qualify for. So my mom. So just like I wanted to back up a tiny little bit too, because I didn't mention that we didn't want to go to the media. So we were not public about what was going on with my mom. And so but every time we went to someone that had authority, even the government people that refused to help us said, if this was my mom, I'd be going to the newspapers. And we're like, okay, well, there's nothing you can do, but you can go to the newspapers if you want. They'll probably forget your story in 2 days, the news cycle and that, but you can go to the newspaper if you want. And
very few families want to go public. It's so anxiety producing, right? Most people just want to just go along and get along, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one wants to be put in the position you're in where you have to become, a public advocate.
Right. And it's easy to advocate when you're not emotionally attached to something. It's easier when you're not emotionally, when it becomes
Yeah.
someone you love, it's
Uh-huh.
like you have to balance your own emotions so that you can be heard in a way that you don't come across as being, a crazy family,
Yeah.
because they make you crazy.
Yeah.
And so they make you emotional. And so we said, you know what, 2 days before, and then they said, well, you could go the media, but your family reputation would be impacted, and your mother would probably never get a bed in the province of New Brunswick if you
Who said that?
speak. I can't tell you who said
But
that.
but these are
Somebody
government officials?
somebody who had the authority to know that. I'll just say that. I can't
Oh my
say who.
gosh, that is
Um,
horrifying.
but it was very threatening, and
Oh,
it was very threatening. And so we said, so we had to make a choice. We were like, okay, do we do we take a risk and just say, well, you know what, our mom comes first, or do we succumb to that kind of pressure and become the family that everyone in town knows? Well, they got their mother evicted from Loch Lomond Villa, that Gold Star place where everybody's supposed to be
yeah.
getting the best care in the world. And we said, you know what, we're here for our mother. I don't care what happens. So me and my sister called. We said, but we're not going to just go to any journalist. So we went to Harry Forrestal, who is he ran at the time the CBC newsroom,
Okay.
or not the he didn't run the newsroom. He did the CBC New Brunswick News.
Okay.
He was highly respected. He is a highly respected journalist. He was the
Yeah.
one that interviewed Michael J. Fox. He has Parkinson's now. He 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 said he called me first, and just like, who am I dealing with, which and so he called me, and then he said, would you like to be interviewed tonight? We'd like to interview you tonight for the news. And I said, sure. So I said, can my sister come? So me and Patty were interviewed on CBC News that night. He ran that news cycle for 7 days. We were like the second story after the COVID. And Samir Sinha did come on, which I was really grateful that Samir came on, because it was during national standards. Laura Tablin Watts came on, and but they basically said, this legislation is a violation of rights. So we did go on the news. So we did get into the news. So then the news followed when my mother died. So they said the family of Pauline Breen has been mourning. So then what happened is it got too much for the government to. They couldn't just
Ignore.
like sweep it under the rug anymore. So they came on and said, there's always a process. There's always many conversations that go into these decisions. They're always hard decisions to make. Like, they can't be specific about any cases for
Okay.
confidentiality reasons, but these are rare occurrences. And so they defended the legislation that the operator used. Jody Hall, who's now head of the Canadian Association of Long-Term Care. She was at the time head of the New Brunswick Association of Long-Term Care. She said there's always many conversations. There's always high ethical comportment that goes into these decisions. And in my career, I can only think of maybe twice, and like it's ever happened, like something like that. And so there was this like kind of defense from the industry that wanted to really minimize the
Yeah.
harm that was being done. So then after mom died, it was awful. And after that, Harry Forrestal did a print article that ended up in CBC News, and it went national.
Yeah.
It was someone texted us. They're like, your mom is just showed up on my phone on it went #1 on Apple
Oh.
News, and I'm like, your mother. And we were like, what? We look, there's my mother in between. My mother, like, sweet little old lady. She was lovely and funny, and she's so nice. But here she is between Kim Kardashian and Nancy Pelosi. Oh dear. So, yeah, I mean, there were some moments where you like, in the midst of your grief, you go, "Well, that's interesting."
Oh yeah, there you go.
That's interesting. So so Harry did this article, and then Harry continued to follow the story. He did. And then the Telegraph Journal ran a story, and it went number one, and it was a news story. It was the 2021 news story of the year was nursing home evictions,
Good.
and we got the legislation opened. We got the
Because
legislation.
of you, they changed the legislation.
Right. So you know what they did? They changed it to, instead of 15 days, they'll give them 30 days.
Which is still not enough, but okay.
Yep.
And what else did they
And
do?
they put in 4 conditions. So before
Oh,
it was
okay.
you can do it for any reason, but they 4 conditions. One of the conditions was you can discharge the patient if the family raises concerns that you feel you cannot meet.
Come on.
Yeah, and that's in the
Oh,
regulations.
come
That's in the
on.
regulations.
So
So
that pretty much says you can neglect residents because if we don't have proper funding or staff to correct the
mhm,
issues the family are rightly addressing, well, then we can just evict you. What is the
right,
point of that? What's the
right.
point of that?
Yeah. And there's like 750 people at the time waiting for nursing homes. 500 of them were in acute care hospital waiting
Oh my
for them. Like, you're going to allow your private industries to crash your public healthcare institution, to
God. Yep.
use them as dumping grounds for people they think they don't want anymore? Like, it's
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
So then we just became very public. And like you say, once you go public, you can't change your mind that you don't want to be
Yeah.
public anymore.
It's out there.
And then she put out a letter to all of her Loch Lomond Villa family that ended up on Facebook, and said and then we got like messages saying that she's talking about your mother on Facebook. On like, this letter ended up on Facebook,
Oh
and
no.
it's a Dear Loch Lomond Villa families, and then it says, like, sometimes you have to relocate people when they're not the right fit, and I
What?
need to do this when families are a safety risk to other residents and
What?
her staff.
So you're a safety. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, I
So
can't
then,
even imagine if I was in your shoe how I would have responded. I
so
can't
it's
even.
like, wait a minute. Like, first of all, like, sometimes, like, some of the stuff they said, like, if it wasn't you, you'd laugh. You go, surely to God, you can't. Like, like, I'm a social worker. If I was a safety risk to an institution of old people,
Yeah, I work.
well, first of all, you should like, report me to my college. You know, you should have an incident report.
Mhm.
You don't, like, there was
And
not.
that's offensive. That's really offensive.
It was really offensive, but it was
Really offensive.
it was following through on this threat
Mhm.
that if you speak up, if you dare to speak up, you're the
Retribution will come.
one. Retribution will come. So the only thing we could do is continue to be public. But I didn't want, for my own integrity,
Yeah.
and I wasn't going to make it between me and her, because she didn't matter anymore. What mattered is that the college disciplined her.
She
The
being the CEO.
Cindy Donovan, the CEO of the long-term care home.
Okay. Okay.
So what mattered to me is that the college did their job
Yeah.
and investigated
So
properly.
this is where we're at now.
Yeah, and I continue to advocate for legislative changes
Good.
so that people like her were not given a free ride to treat families the
Yeah.
way she did, because she was a very high profile person in the government and in long-term care. So in her being able to get away with it, anyone can get away with it.
Yeah.
If she can do it and then be promoted to a leadership position within the health authority, then what does that say to the rest of
Yeah.
the people
Yeah.
who are victims? Like, I'm not going to be a victim. I can be victimized, but I'm not going to sit there and let you lay down
That's a
that
great
you
line.
you get out. Like, yeah.
That's a great
You're
line.
not going to get away with that.
Because a lot of these families were victimized, but that's
Yeah.
how they feel too. Like you're not gonna, yeah, that's a
You're
great line.
not doing it.
Yeah.
And so so then we got to the point where, yes, and it was been 3 years since that was
Well,
put in.
2021, it's
Mhm.
2025. My gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now, as it stands, we're waiting for the review. So the disciplinary
The
hearing. So it's
disciplinary
taking
hearing.
that long, and it hasn't
Mhm.
been scheduled yet, right? At this point.
No, no, and I honestly, I didn't think it would ever happen because there was such a conflict of interest within the NAMB because their members, including the same people that are under discipline,
Yeah.
she had freedom of association to associate within her regulatory college as a member.
Okay.
So I didn't think it would ever happen because I really felt that they were protecting their own people. Vivian, you would like, I did everything. I went to their AGM. I, their
Oh, I hear
AGM.
this from families. Of
I
course
was
you did.
like, I went to their AGM. I was out west at the time on a holiday, and so I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go.
Oh
I was like,
gosh.
I'm going, I'm showing up. And then when I tried to ask them a question, they messaged me and inboxed me and said, "You're not a member. You're not allowed to raise questions, ask concerns. You're only allowed to watch." And that was the regulatory body association meeting. So
My
it was, yeah.
I wonder if do you think that none of this would be happening? There'd be no committee, no changes in the legislation had you not gone public. Do you think that was
Oh, it
necessary?
never. No, public was absolutely the only way, and it was the only thing that threatened them. It was the only power
Yeah.
that we had
Yeah.
to be able to say, "Hey, wait a minute," you know. And as hard as it was, and as hard as it's been, it's like, yes, I celebrate the fact that we've been able to make these really significant changes by staying at the wheel,
Yeah.
but it should never have had to happen. It
Exactly.
should never,
Exactly.
you shouldn't, because most people, and I mean this respectfully, but most people don't have the ability.
Yeah.
They may not have, like when you're traumatized, you don't, very few people have the reserve
It's
to be
very
able to fight.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And with me, because I'm a social worker and I have like my background, my
Yeah.
substantive methodology is in like sociology, structural theories.
Yay, I'm a
I
sociologist.
Yay, I'm a sociologist. Yeah, like high five. But I understood, like I understood how to target the structural approach to change, and it gave me a formula to be able to beat them at their own game. And I wasn't going to go into we actually did get legal advice early on from a
Yeah.
very uh, experienced lawyer.
Yeah.
So we got legal advice, and he said, "You know what? What she did was wrong. It was horrific. What she did was wrong. And however, my job is to give you good advice. And because your mother died of cancer, it would be very difficult to have a wrongful death suit. And you would probably be, poor. And by the time you were able to even, and the likelihood of
So there was no
success,
point in your case
there was no,
where was it going to get you litigation?
where was
I
it
mean,
going
you
to get
probably
us?
could have tried to prove that the inferior care provided because of the lack of resourcing at that time and everything
Yeah.
contributed to her premature death, right?
Yeah.
Like we heard this time and time again from families during the pandemic. But I mean, going through that process,
Do that.
And what I hear from most families, and we only have a couple minutes left, so
Yeah.
I'll go to
Yeah.
my takeaway for you is like,
Yeah.
what families just want, and I mean, I felt the same way too when I had my tragedy, right? I just didn't want this to happen to someone else.
Yeah.
Because you can't go back. You can't save your loved one. You can't undo the mistakes that were made. All you want to do is prevent other people from going through what you went through. Is that how you felt?
That's exactly how we felt, because I can't change the fact that they did that to my mother. I can't change the fact that they acted without ethical comportment and we were isolated and made to feel alone from the people who were supposed to protect her and the people that were supposed to have our back. They all stuck together behind the nursing home industry, and they made us feel that we were all alone, a rare occurrence, and no one's going to listen to you anyway. So they really tried to make us feel helpless.
Yeah.
And we said, no, we're not playing by your rules, because your rules only work for you. And
So sorry
so
that
we said we're going to do this, and we can't change our mother, that what happened, but we can make sure that it never happens again to anybody else. And we were able to do some of that, but the legislation really needs to be, the rights need to be protected in legislation, so that people like her, those nursing home operators like her, they see that if you do that, there's going to be a consequence. And
Yeah.
the government, when they opened the legislation, the Green Party tried to introduce an amendment to have an appeals process,
Okay.
and the Higgs government, the PC government, turned it down.
Oh my gosh.
They said there's always
How?
it's a rare occurrence, and they actually
So if
said
it's such
that,
a rare occurrence, what's the problem with having an appeals process? What's
right,
the problem?
right, like
Oh,
if
this
you're never
makes
going to
me
have to
so
use
angry.
it.
So why do you care? Why do you care? Have the appeals process in place. This is ludicrous to me.
It was
Ludicrous.
crazy. And I have it all. Like, I have that videotape of that whole debate, 25 minutes of it, going back and forth as to why it's okay for long-term care homes to evict old people without having any right to appeal. And so it's wrong. And so they need to own that. And so then the seniors advocate did come out with a systemic review, and they are recommending that there be that fairness of discharge. And so now that the government's changed to the Susan Holtz government's a liberal government, she seems to be interested in her citizens. So I'm just really hoping that with the new government, she'll do what's right. And what's right is to fix the legislation for good, like put proper protections in for people, not for the industry owners. It's the frail, vulnerable old people who need the protection, not the people making all the money.
Well, and here's to hoping that the disciplinary hearing, which is coming up soon, we don't know when, but
We
should
don't
be
know
soon,
when.
will be a further catalyst towards, and you can
Yeah.
use that. Not that you should have to, but I can tell you, you're going to be advocating more as soon as that decision
Yeah.
comes out. And if it comes the way we think it probably will go in your favor.
I honestly, Vivian, I like to know that I don't have.
Who knows, right? Nobody knows how it'll shake out.
I hope. I
Yeah.
hope. I
Yeah.
hope.
And we
Yeah.
hope it'll lead to the change, at minimum,
Yeah.
implementing an appeals process in that legislation. Because
Yeah.
to me, that just sounds absolutely backwards, that they would not have a basic appeals process
Yeah.
to mitigate for potential abuses at the individual home level. That makes zero sense to anyone with any common sense. So I just pray to God, I pray to anyone you believe in, that this works out in your favor, because I really think that this will be, a catalyst for more federal, national change, as it should be, right? And of course, we can talk about standards and how they dropped the ball there. And I've not held back about how I feel about, our now step down prime minister implementing voluntary, when we clearly need, mandatory standards that protect residents, and that's still not there. But people like you are doing your part, more than your part, to help people. And, I just want to say thank you, because you have sacrificed so much, your family, everything you've been through. You shouldn't have had to gone through that. And I'm just so sorry you did go through that. And I applaud you for what you've done to help people, because this is something that needs to be discussed. And I'm so happy we had this conversation, because I think people need to hear about what happened, and the fact that this is a big gap. In many provinces, I'm imagining legislation around eviction, and we need to better protect these residents from situations like this unfolding.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you
let me
so
show you.
much.
So these are my mom's pajamas that they evicted her in.
Oh my gosh.
Gray, white striped pajamas. She had beautiful nighties, but these are her pajamas. I keep those, and they still have her name on them, Polly Breen, 27 Elm House. That's
Oh,
my mother's pajamas. And this is my, I don't know if you could, this is my my mom with all her grandkids here.
I love this so much.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
I love
this is
this.
my niece said that. She said, "To our favorite Graham, we are so lucky to have you, and we love you. We love all your grandkids love you." So she did a book for my mom on my
Oh, you're
mother
gonna make
was
me cry.
my
That's
mother
so
was
sweet.
so loved, and it's hard on everybody, and but we are going to make a difference for other people who also love their Grahams.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you so much.
thank you very much, Vivian, for giving me a chance to
Oh, I'm
meet
gonna stop
you.
this recording so because I'm gonna cry and I don't want to cry to everyone on YouTube. So I'm gonna stop this recording. We're gonna talk and thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
And we will be back in touch. So let me
Mhm.
just stop this recording. Thank you.